Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Plus. The top story that we're tracking at this hour comes by the way of US economy data. The US economy grew last quarter at the slowest pace in 2 years as consumer and government spending cooled amid a sharp pickup in inflation. The US gross domestic product or the GDP increased at 1.6% annually in January to March of 2024, missing the expectation of a larger 2.4% rise seen in the quarter. Now, the growth was also a clear slowdown from the 3.4% increase in the final 3 months of the last year and the weakest growth since mid of 2022. The main growth engines of the world's biggest economy, personal spending, rose at a slowest forecast pace of 2.5%. The figure is a significant loss and shows a significant loss of momentum at the start of 2024 after the economy wrapped up a strong year. The headline inflation, which includes food and energy prices, remember, rose to about 3.4% in Q1, up from 1.8% in Q4. Take a look.
The U.S. economy grew at its slowest pace in 2 years in the first quarter of 2024, while inflation surged. That's according to the Commerce Department, which said Thursday that gross domestic product rose 1.6% in the first quarter, well below economists' estimates. It was also less than half the 3.4% rate in the fourth quarter. The Commerce Department also said a measure of inflation called the Personal Consumption Expenditures, or PCE price index, excluding food and energy prices, jumped by a rate of 3.7% in the first quarter, well above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. The increase reinforced expectations the Fed will not cut interest rates before September. High housing costs have contributed to price gains, but in an exclusive interview with Reuters, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says she thinks these have peaked.
I have no doubt that housing is its contribution is going to be falling over the coming year. That's the single most important contributor to inflation. And although we have a very good, strong job market, the labor market is doing very well. Not seeing evidence that the labor market is so hot that wage pressures are a source of inflation.
Traders currently see about a 60% chance of a rate cut at the Fed September meeting, down from 70% Wednesday, according to the CME FedWatch tool.
All right, what do we really make of that data? To talk about that, joining us is Ajay Sahai. He's the DG Federation of Indian Export Organization. Mr. Sahai, thank you very much for taking time out, sir. Any hopes of perhaps a rate cut in the near term seem to be dashed now?
Yeah, of course, with the inflation moving up from 1.8 to 3.7%, the chances of rate cut is definitely bleak. In fact, this is a trend which we are seeing in most of the economies. And that's why we are not hopeful that anywhere we will see a reduction in interest rates. Everywhere, either because of the commodity prices or because of the food prices, including petroleum product, we are seeing little upward movement in the prices. And that's why unless the inflation in any of the countries is brought down on a sustained basis to 2% and whatever be the target in case of India around 4%, we will not see any change in the interest rates.
Okay, my colleague Krishna Kumar also with me here in the studios. Krishna, it also does look like the conversation will now be changing in the US from a soft landing or a possibility of a soft landing. We're now moving towards stagflation.
Well, absolutely. And also, it's extremely concerning. One is definitely the high inflation number and all the optimism and the hopes for a rate cut, which have been building in the US and across the world, including India. Now, they seem likely to be dashed. And the fact that the GDP growth rate has come in significantly below what was estimated is a major cause for concern. And that's the reason why I want to ask Mr. Sahai, how do you think, or how crucial is it going to be for Indian companies, Indian businesses, and the Indian economy that the world's biggest economy is not performing as well as it should?
So in fact, it only relates to whatever we are exporting to US, and most of the exports now India has also moved to the technology and knowledge-driven sector export, where we will not be facing much challenges. In the labor-intensive sectors of exports, like you can say to some extent on apparel, footwear, there may be definitely some impact. which may slow down the exports also. But I think Indian economy has shown resilience. Recently, only IMF has now upwardly forecasted for the Indian economy to grow at 6.8%. So by and large, we are a domestically demand-driven economy, and that's why I don't expect much to change, even with these numbers coming into the US.
All right, we'll talk more about these numbers, break down the US data as well as its repercussion on the Indian economy after a very short break. Mr. Sahai, stay with us.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
Luxury is now becoming a need rather than something that you aspire to be. So that is adding a lot of fuel. Obviously, government has played a vital role in it.
In a city like Mumbai, a luxury home may be something upwards of rupees 10 crores. In city like Delhi, again maybe something upwards of 8-9 crores. But in Bangalore, we typically define a luxury home, anything which is upwards of about 3 crores.
It's a combination of increased wealth, availability of more luxurious homes, and simultaneously the overall economy doing better.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus news is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
You were the chosen one to direct Mr. Bachchan for his first endorsement, for his first appearance on the small screen.
It was a life-changing moment.
Have you been a rebel with a cause?
There was a sense of responsibility, there was a sense of frustration.
Are you worried about cancel culture?
You tell a story with a fierce psychosis, you're gonna spoil it anyway.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
India's ever-evolving urban landscape is witnessing a new revolution. And this one comes on 4 wheels.
The affluence has been growing. Cars are becoming more a reflection of what you are.
Nobody's talking about hatchbacks. Now what next? The next is the SUV.
The contribution of SUVs is close to 55-60% of the automobile sales these days.
Is that even manufacturers like to sell SUVs?
So, how did a nation obsessed with fuel economy come to love heavy gas-guzzling sports utility vehicles? Let's look at how India fell in love with the SUV.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus news is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Business Plus. We are, of course, in discussion with Ajay Sahai, DG, Federation of Indian Export Organization, and discussing the US economic numbers. The GDP for the first quarter of financial year 24 in the US has come in at 1.6%, well below the expectation of 2.4%. Inflation continues to be a problem. In fact, a ballooning problem at 3.5% for the quarter gone by. What does it really mean for India as well as for the US? To discuss that, Mr. Sahai continues to be with us. Mr. Sahai, before we went into the break, one of the conversations that we were having is the impact on the Indian IT or services sector. Now, imports and imports during the Q1 of FY24 for the US are actually heartening, come to think of it. The numbers which are, which are taken off or subtracted from the GDP calculation actually shaved off about 0.96% from the headline growth figure in the US. What does it really mean for India? It does look like US is continuing to, import. That data is not beating down anytime soon.
No, you have rightly said, because when you are looking into India's trade with the US, we are not seeing any impact on them. Though, of course, if you are segregating into sectors, probably some sectors may have witnessed some slowdown. But by and large, if you are looking into India's overall exports to US, both of goods and services, they are increasing. We are hoping that in times to come, probably companies will have much more liquidity to push for further IT and IT-enabled services growth to that. We are also diversifying our basket of both in goods and services to US, and probably that will help us to continue on the robust path so far as exports to the US is concerned.
Okay, so as far as then government spending is concerned, and the fact that there is very little to no federal government spending, private consumption is also taking a beating. Is that likely to have an impact on the Indian IT companies?
I don't think that will impact. Probably the less purchasing power at the disposal of the common people may impact some of the lifestyle product. That's why I'm not expecting much to change for AIT or IT-enabled services, or even some of the machinery technology which we are exporting. Probably some of the consumption material, particularly, as I said, apparel, footwear, lifestyle goods, may feel the pinch in times to come.
Okay, and I also want to talk about an important commodity, and that is of course oil. Oil prices fell on the back of easing tensions in the Middle East, and of course the US economy data also showing signs of cooling off. But at the same time, there was some uptick in oil as of this morning with the US oil inventory data coming out. What are you making of the oil price movement in the next couple of days?
In fact, the demand is definitely tepid, and therefore, despite the supply side challenges, I'm not expecting oil to move further. And in fact, India as a country has the option to increase its oil import from Russia. Also, that's an additional satisfaction which we have. So on the one hand, I'm not expecting much movement in the oil prices because demand has taken a hit. Supply side challenges may remain, and they may push to some extent the oil prices. But I think India, to a large extent, will be insulated for such development, as our oil pool has now fairly diversified.
The only question we have to ask at this point is that, the sentiment that comes out of the US will certainly impact markets across the world. It is the most powerful economy in the world, has the capacity to shape, the economic sentiment of the world, isn't it, at the end of the day?
And I just want to add quickly to that, Mr. Sahai. We saw, of course, Asian markets taking a beating. We saw Indian markets as of this Friday, in a deep red. I want to understand from you, from a markets perspective, of course, there is a sentimental hit there. But as far as the rate cut cycle is concerned, is Indian government's central bank going to emulate perhaps the same sort of trajectory that the US Feds are going to, which is higher for longer?
No, in fact, I'm not expecting the central bank of the country to take any decision on the rate cut till inflation on a sustained basis is brought to around 4% level. And even if it occasionally happens, probably the decision will not be there. So far as the market are concerned, I think if you look into the Indian market, we are quite vibrant market despite huge outbreak from the Indian market by the FIEO. Probably the Indian consumers continues to drive the growth on the Indian equity market. So I think we are now more driven by the internal investment in the equity market as compared to foreign portfolio investment.
All right, and hopefully Indian markets continue to remain and be driven by internal doings and happenings within India. Mr. Sahai, thank you very much, sir, for taking time out. Thank you for joining us here on News9.
Thank you.
But moving on now, WhatsApp won't stay in India if it is made to break encryption of messages. The messaging service platform told the Delhi High Court in a case challenging the IT rules. The advocate appearing in the Delhi High Court on behalf of WhatsApp told the court that people use the platform due to the privacy it offers and assures, and also because messages are encrypted end-to-end. Now, the remarks were made as the Delhi High Court was in fact hearing petitions by WhatsApp and its parent company Meta challenging the 2021 IT or the information technology rules for social media intermediaries. WhatsApp as well as Facebook have challenged the Rule 4 Part 2 of the IT rules. The rule dictates that a social media intermediary provide messaging service shall enable identification of the first originator of the information, as may be required by either a judicial order or a competent authority. Now, meanwhile, the lawyers appearing for the central government had argued that the rule was significant when objectionable content is spread on platforms in cases such as those of communal violence. All in all, both Centre as well as the lawyers for Meta and WhatsApp are at loggerheads. Court is currently hearing the matter. To discuss further India's privacy rules, which the Delhi High Court has said also have some limitations, we have Nikhil Pahwa, founder MediaNama, joining us. Also with us is Kanishk, Gaur, CEO of India Future Foundation. I want to come to you first, Nikhil. Thank you very much for taking time out, the two of you. What are we making of the arguments that WhatsApp advocate has put out in the court? He says clearly that we are trusted with the privacy of our customers, who believe that every message they send will not be read into, will be encrypted, and their privacy would remain intact. In fact, they take pride and have put out full-page advertisements on the kind of privacy that WhatsApp offers. Court and is hearing the matter, of course, so there's nothing more to what will happen from the court. But what are you making of those preliminary arguments for now?
Well, frankly, I think WhatsApp is absolutely correct in the sense, if they have to break end-to-end encryption in India, they will have to break it globally. You can't do a separate sort of product for a separate country, because effectively it's you can message anyone across the world today because WhatsApp works the same way across the world. It also means that if they have to break it specifically for a particular country, then the messages coming in will not be encrypted. That impacts the privacy of people messaging in. But technically, they can't do it separately for one country. I also think that WhatsApp is in the right over here because, frankly, there is a question of proportionality. You can't risk, the message, the privacy, the safety of communication between two individuals. Let's say between a journalist and their source, between, let's say, parents and their kids, between even people who are in security agencies prefer to use end-to-end encrypted platforms because their communications are safe, right? So you can't basically create exceptions for certain messages because it breaks the technology that enables, the communication to be safe.
But,
and frankly,
Nikhil,
one important point, you can't make us, as citizens of this country, you can't make us more secure by making everyone vulnerable. So it's a question of proportionality here.
All right. But, one of the arguments, of course, of the central government, Krishna, also is that how do we really find who is the person who's responsible for sending that one fake message, that one communal message that ends up hurting a lot of people? And that argument emanates from the kind of lynchings that India saw back in 2014 and 15, which is when the entire case started unfolding, and it has been since then. The arguments from both sides are, one side, of course, here in this case, WhatsApp saying that we are responsible for privacy of our people, of our audience, of the people, of our consumers. Central government saying, how do you really expect us to tame on these false messages, on these messages that end up spreading hatred, if we don't really know who's the first originator?
Right, and in a sense, WhatsApp's ability to tag certain messages has forwarded many times. So sort of tells people that this is something that's been, being passed from hand to hand. WhatsApp has been taking measures on its platform to sort of alert people as to what kind of messages they're receiving and how to trust them or not trust them, just to alert them, if to intimate them that this is not a one-person message that's been sent to you. This has been forwarded across the board, so there's a good chance that might not be any truth to it. That kind of a situation. But of course, here the only analogy I can think of is, do you throw the baby out with the bath water? Yes, of course, you need to throw the bath water out, but you're going to throw the baby along with it as well, because and in that sense, I tend to agree with Nikhil in the fact that this privacy seems to be like the basic trade secret with which WhatsApp is operating. Okay. And for people, for example, if messages between you and me anybody can break into it and start reading them. Or for the matter, you and your spouse, or you and your mother, would you still trust your messaging platform?
All right, fair argument. Absolutely. Kanishk, are we throwing the baby out with the bath water? Does it look like to you, from what the WhatsApp advocates said today, that they may look to exit India as a market? They have a substantial market share here, about 400 million Indian customers.
See, WhatsApp is right. So for one country, they can't make an exception. Breaking a gold standard of encryption, which is the Diffie-Hellman algorithm, which is not just WhatsApp follows, but other platforms like Signal and Telegram also follow. So making exceptions for one country specific to the IT rules, I don't think so that's the right way to move forward. Particularly when it comes to operating with law enforcement agencies, there are mechanisms in terms of sharing metadata, in terms of providing access to law enforcement in the name of national security. But the whole privacy of the country can't be put at risk, especially in the case when you're trying to bring out a data protection law, a Digital India Act. You're asking a platform to break its gold standard on encryption and share information about people. So that's equivalent to doing snooping officially. So I don't think so that's the right way to move forward, particularly asking platforms to break encryption or bringing out rules where they would want a company to make exceptions, where the whole world is moving towards data governance, protection and privacy. If WhatsApp does it in India, similar requests will come to them from other countries as well in terms of sharing this information. So there could be other mechanisms that could be looked forward to, but particularly making exception in one country, I don't think so that's the right way to do it. And companies do take such calls where they decide to move out of specific countries if they believe that the standards and the policies don't match their global policies which are aligned, right? So a lot of times we've seen companies have moved out of specific countries because they believe certain rules have been enforced on them, or they don't find the values matching the way they want the business to operate, right? We saw a lot of Chinese government influence as well in terms of pushing certain platforms, and a lot of platforms decided not to work in China. So I think best is to make certain amendments in the IT rules, particularly on these specific sections, to ensure there is greater transparency, trust, and if law enforcement want information in the name of national security, they can seek metadata or they can use IT rules to invoke specific sections. When it comes to communal harm and misharmony which is happening, I think WhatsApp has started flagging messages which cause all of this civil unrest.
Absolutely.
And those could be shut down.
Nikhil, at this stage, the only thing I can ask you is this: is WhatsApp having a BBM or BlackBerry Messenger moment in India?
It's been having it for a while, Krishna, because the government had been informed multiple times that end-to-end encryption cannot be broken, that it's a risk to privacy, not just by WhatsApp, but also by civil society. And the IT rules came out in 2021, but they'd been informed from 2019 onwards. So this is despite being informed about this, that government passed these rules. And I think WhatsApp is well within their rights to challenge these rules, and I'm glad they did it. But there's one thing that happened a couple of days ago, which you should know, Krishna, that the US has passed this surveillance law called RISA, which extends surveillance, extraterritorial surveillance via US companies. So, whether we're using email from US companies or we're using messaging from US companies, all of those can be snooped upon under US law without a warrant. End-to-end encryption is the only technology that prevents the US government from snooping on our messaging and communication. Everything else can be snooped upon. So I think we need to use end-to-end encryption doesn't just protect us from surveillance in India, and as a country, we need to bring about surveillance reform, but it also protects us from surveillance from other countries.
Okay. Nikhil, just to play the devil's advocate here, what the Delhi High Court said in its statement, and one of the remarks that it made while hearing the case was no freedom is absolute. That includes right to privacy. That includes, in fact, all the freedoms, all the fundamental rights that we enjoy as Indians. None of them are absolute. So what should make one think that we can do what we want, we can spread the kind of messages we want, the fake messages, the messages that have the ability to influence political decisions or to tar someone's reputation or to lead to a lynching or a killing? What gives us the right to spread all those messages without an intervention from the government, or without letting the government know that we in fact are the first originators of that message?
So I think we have to take the path of least damage in a sense over here, right? And therefore, are there other mechanisms for identifying who has sent those messages? It's not that what you have to break into encryption, and that's the only way to find someone. You can go from message to message to message to lead to the first originator. Quite often, even on social media, there are enough politicians who spread hate speech. What is the history of the Indian government when it comes to acting on them? It doesn't, right? I mean, there are in multiple instances, especially during elections, where politicians publicly create hatred. Where is a case filed against them? Riots are normally started by political actors. The police needs to act on ground to prevent violence. If there is misinformation, disinformation, or communal hatred being spread on WhatsApp, it's also being spread on other platforms, many of them publicly, many of them by leaders of this country. Let's be realistic over here, right? The purpose here is to basically be able to do surveillance of WhatsApp, not to protect people.
All right, Nikhil,
and I have one important thing. The court, if I would ask the court, where is the surveillance reform in this country? Where is it where security agencies are restricted from snooping on politicians, on journalists? How is the Indian government use Pegasus against Indian citizens? Where is restriction on them on violating our privacy? The data protection law today exempts the government of India from provisions of the law. So citizens basically have no protection against surveillance from the government, but the government wants to go to court to basically harm our privacy. That's what's going on in this country.
All right, fair enough. That is, of course, what Nikhil Pahwa's views are on the said matter. But before I move on, let me also quickly get in Kanishk back into the conversation. Kanishk, you heard Nikhil, you also heard Krishna, and we heard you. So you're of the opinion, of course, that there are better ways of working around this as opposed to asking WhatsApp to make an exception for India and to start decrypting or to ensure that the encryption end-to-end does not stay as it is at the moment. What are these measures? What can WhatsApp do to prevent misuse of its platform?
Introducing backdoors is definitely not the way. What the NSO group did, and WhatsApp and Meta sued them, because NSO was trying to introduce a zero-click backdoor, and governments were using it for snooping it against the citizens of the country. Now, if rule what the current government comes out with, this will officially allow them to get into anyone's device. That's not the right way to do. The best way could be sharing of metadata, sharing of intelligence, flagging of numbers, more of partnership between the government and the civil society, as well as looking at law enforcement agencies to work together with Meta to ensure there is more safety, more trust, and flagging of these. Like, there is a rule where accordingly they share information of numbers which they have been logged or numbers which have been reported. So if they start tracking at metadata, they can easily find out who are the first originator of the message. So breaking end-to-end encryption, there could be alternate measures which could be adopted. The law enforcement rules which are typically followed by law enforcement agencies in Europe is they ask for metadata. They seek access to metadata and they try and make sense through metadata, looking at investigations. But backdoor is something which is completely not acceptable at this point of time. So,
all right.
Continuously tracking and monitoring groups, platforms, or individuals who are doing hate speech or spreading community misharmony. Metadata is the best way I would look at doing analysis and making sense out of. Right? And because these people are not just on one platform, but they are on multiple platforms, right? So making sense out of all of that data.
Absolutely. Metadata is one of the options, Kanishk, Gaur, Nikhil Pahwa. Metadata, of course, is one of the options through which WhatsApp can perhaps mitigate and decide on to what extent it wants to give information of its customers to the government. But remember, at the moment, Delhi High Court is in fact hearing that petition, that plea which has been filed by WhatsApp challenging Rule 4, Part 2 of the IT Rules 2021, which makes it incumbent on an intermediary, a social media intermediary such as WhatsApp, to furnish data of the first person who has made or typed a message, the first originator of the message. WhatsApp is currently challenging that rule, and that order will of course come in later. The Delhi High Court is currently hearing that petition. It has now been slated for August, which is when we're going to get more updates on that matter. But before we close this show, in a classic case of a student outshining the master, Blinkit is now more valuable than Zomato's food delivery business. As per Goldman Sachs, the implied value of Blinkit, the quick commerce startup that Zomato acquired back in 2022, is now larger than Zomato's food delivery business. Zomato acquired Blinkit for about $568 million in 2022. Since then, Blinkit's implied valuation has grown to $13 billion, whopping $13 billion on the back of improved performance as per Goldman Sachs. Now, the Goldman Sachs values Blinkit at about 119 rupees a share, which is a $13 billion equity valuation, higher than the food delivery business of Zomato, valued at 98 rupees a share. The quick delivery player is likely to see a compound annual growth rate of 53% in its gross order value between financial years 2024 to 2027. All in all, suggesting that Blinkit, the quick commerce arm of Zomato, is growing faster than the food delivery app. People are doing more Blinkit or blinking it more as opposed to ordering food more.
And interesting, because once upon a time not long ago, the questions were asked on the quick commerce delivery business as whether it has the right unit economics and the right logical reason to exist. Yes, it's convenient, it's great, lapped up by consumers, but does it make business sense? Does it have, for every delivery that a quick commerce business makes, is it making money? So is there unit economics logic in quick commerce business? From there to now, a vote of appreciation, of sound vote of confidence from Goldman Sachs. And to the point where it's talking about the potential of this business, that is bigger than the food delivery business, probably because people are getting more health conscious. They're ordering in all the ingredients via Blinkit and making the food at home, rather than making a restaurant make the food and bring it to them.
Absolutely. It does look like people are blinking it more as opposed to ordering in via Zomato's food delivery app. Those, of course, numbers coming in by the way of Goldman Sachs. But with that, we've come to the end of this show. Thank you very much for watching.
Running in the snow is a much more tougher thing than running just in the altitude.
जहाँ से मेरे को लगा था कि इट वुड बी ए पीस ऑफ केक, इसके लिए बहुत मेहनत करनी पड़ती है, जैसे दिखता है वैसा होता नहीं है सर।